We talked about career path. We had Pradeep. Pradeep is a former HSBC, regional HSBC compliance financial crime monitoring. He was also former Barclays, former Citibank, former RBS. He joined us for about a few minutes to discuss career path and take questions. So today we'll be moving faster than that. We'll be talking about KYC. Now let's go into the background of KYC. And I love to start with background because this is a foundation class. So if you have experience in KYC, then you might want to just bear with us because we'll be going from the basic. Yeah. So before I start, let me give you a background on the information or the evolution of KYC. Yeah. And a lot of people be like, KYC, what's KYC? Or how did KYC come into play? It was started with the first recorded incident of money laundering, which is said to have happened in China approximately, I think, about 4,000 years ago. And what happened then was there were a couple of merchants who would hide their wealth or their profits from the rulers in order to avoid it being taken by the government. Yeah. In modern times, this is known as tax evasion, where you try to hide your profit, so the government does not know how much you have. You know, that's called tax evasion. It's a financial crime. Yeah. We also have, however, and it was surprisingly that the foundation of money laundering laws did not start until 1950. Let me try and connect my headphones so I can hear you. Or you can. Okay. Yeah, I'm all set. So, I mean, there were a couple of series of money laundering that was recorded from 1920. We have the Al Capone and the modern invention of money laundering in 1920. We have the likes of Antamea Lansky. We have the likes of the Las Vegas and the secrecy of Swiss banking. And you can look this up, you can read them. They will help you understand how KYC started. And in 1950, the first modern KYC regulation on gangster and corruption. I mean, this was the Federal Deposit Insurance Act that was passed to govern the Federal Deposit Insurance. That's in the US. We also have in 1960, 1970, introduction of acts. In 1980, we have the case of Pablo Escobar, which actually escapes the lead of money laundering. Then they introduced the Money Laundering Act, Control Act, and the Anti-Drug Abuse. In 1990, we have the likes of the TCP, IP, and regulation struggles, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. So if you know, from what I've been saying, I've been mentioning acts. In 19 days, they introduced this act, which means that KYC is all about rules and regulation. Yeah. So the background. So just to give you some of the background of KYC in modern days. HSBC was slapped. When they say slapped, that means, you know, it's not that bad. 100 million, I know it's a lot of money, but it's not that bad, trust me. Fines after the US probe. We have the likes of Deutsche Bank, fined for 163 million. We have the likes of Deutsche Bank, ING, 900 million, Capital Bank, you know, JP Morgan also fined, Danske Bank, resignable. There was this kind of over 200 billion euros. We have Commonwealth fined 700 million. We have the likes of, so it goes on and on and on and on. So why am I letting you know this? The reason is because if there is no rules and regulation, then no one can break it. It means that KYC works, KYC and AML works with rules and regulations, strict rules and regulations. According to my screen here, there's been an increase in fine in 2012 towards 2015, and there was a drop, but it's increasing now due to the introduction of cybercrime and cryptocurrency issue. That actually shows on the map on the left how KYC and AML actually plays an impact in fine. How do we manage this? Now, the fine has been increasing, like I said, high spike in 2014, and it's going up again in 2018, and it's still climbing up. Now, rules and regulations. Let's talk about rules and regulations. A few of the rules and regulations. Now, if this is your first time that you are attending KYC session, it's very important to understand that KYC is governed by rules and regulations. I'll give you a typical example for people who might be at the stage of going for an interview. If, for example, I attend an interview and this is my first time, I've read about it, I've attended maybe one or two training session, what I would focus on or channel my energy is understanding the common terminology in KYC and AML field. Why? If I go for an interview as a car mechanic, even if I do not have a lot of experience, it will be important for me not to use a descriptive terms to show that I've got experience, I know what I'm talking about. Say using words like, do you know when I removed that wire, I put it into that cup that thing that looked like a cup to start the engine. Then once I hear that there's a sound, I go back and remove that basic thing that looked like a ball. You don't use description, you use terms. So you say stuff like carburetor, you use words like flat filter, twinner injection. You know, it shows that at least you are part of the industry. It's the same thing with KYC. So if you go for an interview, you try as much as possible to use some of these regulations, you know. And this regulation doesn't mean that you have to know all the regulation inside out. Just say according to. It will make sense to the interviewer. Trust me, it works all the time. To give you a background, let's talk about the UK legal framework. I know there's some people on the call that are listening from the USA. I know 2 is listening from Nigeria, 1 is listening from Canada. I will be talking about your framework in a minute, but I just want to focus on the UK framework. It's quite similar in different jurisdictions. It's similar, but there is some differences. So I'll just focus on the UK legal framework for now. Now, we have something called the FATF. Yeah, FATF stands for Financial Action Task Force. So this is one thing that you always want to mention when you go for interview. You know, when I was talking about the plug, the filter, you just say, according to FATF, it was recommended that this and that, just blah, trust me. It always works every time. Now, FATF provides guidance to the like of United Nations and as well as the EU. Now, EU and United Nations get their standards for financial crime from FATF. So FATF provides recommendation like they expect a nation to have this form of control to fight anti-bribery and corruption, to fight money laundering, and blah, blah, blah. Then EU and UN then provide guidance to the UK government. Yeah, the UK government then provides legislation to FCA, stands for Financial Conduct Authority. That is the financial regulator in UK. And we have the legislations as well, which are the money laundering regulations and all that. Under the FACF, they also provide the guidance. It's called SYSC. It means systems and control. Under the legislation, we have POCA and MLR. POCA stands for Proceed of Crime Act. Legislation, under the legislation, we have MLR, stand for Money Laundering Regulation 2017. So if I go for an interview, I will say words like, according to the Money Laundering 2017, we must identify beneficiary owner, we must identify a customer and verify them using documents. Trust me, it makes all sense, perfect sense. Just because I said according to money laundering, or if I say according to POCA, this and that, or according to FCA guidance, this and that. Just you knowing it might not create credibility if you don't back it up. If it won't create enough credibility, but if you back it up with FCA, FATF, according to the EU regulations, according to Money Laundering Regulation 2017, it makes perfect sense. Or you say according to Joint Money Laundering Steering Group. That's what JMLSG means. And I'm talking about a few of them in a minute. Now let's talk about FATF. FATF is a Financial Action Task Force. Yeah. It is an intergovernmental body established in 1989 by the ministers of its members' jurisdiction. Yeah. So, you know, their objective is to set standard, like I said, to promote effective, implementation of legal regulatory and operational measures for combating money laundering, blah, blah, blah. Hello? Anyone wants to ask a question? Okay. let me just check to see no one is missing or everyone is on mute. Where are you? Bear with me 1 minute, please. Attendees. Okay, I'm going to unmute Abdullah. I'm going to unmute Dami Bada. Please mute yourself. I'm going to unmute a and please mute yourself. I'm going to unmute Olu Oshitipe. Mute yourself afterwards. Shola up here, I'm going to mute you as well. So please mute yourself just immediately. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Now I know everyone can actually unmute and mute, so you can do that by yourself. So if you have any question, please don't wait for me, just unmute yourself. That'd be great. Okay, so FATF is just an intergovernmental body. They provide guidance to the likes of the EU, the UN. We have FinCEN. So FinCEN, for the US guys on the call, the FinCEN is the Financial Crime Enforcement Network. So if you want to read further on KYC or how due diligence is all about, just go put into Google FinCEN or put into Google FATF, FATF. It will provide you with a lot of documentation you can read till you knock yourself out. So the FinCEN stands for the Financial Crime Enforcement Network. Is a bureau of the United States Department of the Treasury that collects and analyzes information about financial transactions, yeah, in order to combat domestic and international money laundering, terrorist financing, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to get into this. I'm just giving you this. If you enjoy reading this type of stuff, then you should know that compliance is for you. But if you're more of the investigative kind of person, then maybe you want to start thinking about financial crime. Yeah, but let's move on. Joint Money Laundering Steering Group, that's what JMLSG stands for. It's made up of a leading UK trade association in the financial service industry. Its aim is to promulgate good practices in countering money laundering and to give practical assistance in interpreting the money laundering regulation. So where I showed the ML 2017 is all regulatory based. It comes in form of and it's so technical in legal form. So what the joint money laundering does is they interpret it to be more readable, understandable, and what it means in terms of good practices. This is what you should do. This is what the regulation expects you to do, and this is what. So if you're just getting into KYC, I would advise you to read Joint Money Laundering Steering Group. It's very practical. Yeah. Okay. OFAC. Now, OFAC is the Office of the Foreign Assets Control of the U.S. Department. Yeah. OFAC acts under the Presidential National Emergency Power, as well as so when you hear stuff like Trump, Donald J. Trump say stuff like when he says stuff like under the OFAC, yeah, under the Presidential National Emergency Power invested upon me, I grant the specific legislation, impose control on transactions, freeze assets under the US jurisdiction. We hereby sanction Russia, we hereby sanction China. He uses the power of OFAC, yeah? He uses the power of the Department of Treasury administrators to impose financial sanction or economic sanction, including trade sanction. So anytime an individual or an organization or a country or jurisdiction and even a region is sanctioned from the US point of view, they use OFAC. UN could also sanction. The EU could also sanction. We have HMT, that's the UK, could also sanction. It stands for Her Majesty Treasury, sometimes referred to as the Exchequer or more informally the Treasury. Yeah, it's the British government department responsible for developing and executing the government's public finance policy and economic policy. This is all the boring part, but we will get into the interesting part in a bit. Now, what is KYC and what does it stand for? KYC stands for Know Your Customer. And please, if you have any question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me. I'll be happy to take it. So KYC is all about identification, verification, and monitoring. Yeah. Now, this is a very good way to explain KYC if anyone asks you what KYC is. Yeah, KYC stands for Know Your Customer. However, KYC is built on just this three factor. No more, no less. As broad as KYC could be, and as narrow as narrow it could be, is only based on identification, verification, and monitoring. So I'm going to take you on a journey. We'll talk about identification, verification, and monitoring a bit. Yeah. Now, let's assume there's an individual. Yeah. An individual is being understood by a set of rules and regulation. They are called a regulatory requirement. So when we say KYC, KYC is about gathering information about a customer or a business counterparty. So I said KYC is identification, verification, and monitoring. So for you to identify someone, there's a set of information you need to gather. You can't create the information by yourself. You need to follow the regulatory requirement, and that's what this stands for. So there's a set of information which is called a minimum standard that must be acquired to understand different type of customer. So an individual is a different type of customer. An individual who owns, who's a high net worth by definition has a different set of requirements. An individual who owns prominent function like president or national level, executive level, they have a different type of requirement. So as we go further, you begin to understand what I mean. But in general, just understand that a customer can either be an individual or corporate entity. It can also be a government. Yeah. Anyone, government have accounts. They've got an escrow account. They call their account escrows accounts. They have a treasury accounts. Individual has savings, current, wherever. Government has entity has trade account, business account, etc. There's a lot of accounts. Yeah. So now KYC is Know Your Customer, but it's actually it follows the regulatory requirements. Yeah. And those regulatory requirement has a global standard that creates a standard banking practice. I would break that down. So what I'm trying to explain here is there is an individual. To understand an individual, there is a set of requirements that you need to capture to understand the individual. That set of information, you can go above it, but you cannot go below it. That's why it's called a minimum regulatory requirement. Yeah. Now, to understand a customer, you're trying to, for example, an individual, you're trying to identify thefts or fraud, you're trying to identify money laundering, you're trying to identify terrorist financing. And this is just a basic type of financial crime that we will be talking about. Although it is a lot of financial crime out there, it's an expanding concept, but I'm going to try and make it simple because this is just foundational. Yeah. Okay. Now, gathering this basic information is not just to prevent money laundering alone, to say, oh, we want to know, or the purpose of we getting all this information is just to make sure that you're not a thief, you're not a fraud. No, it's not just that, because there is also a law that actually governs customer fairness and market fairness and transparency as well, and how you treat vulnerable customers. Now, those data that is being gathered to understand the customer are also, it allows banks know customer better, help banks to manage any risk on the customer's behalf, and provide them with better customer services. I'll give you a very typical example in today's context. You're a type of customer, a bank must have gathered a lot of data about how you spend your money. In the morning, when I get up, I go to my train station, I touch in at a bank station, and when I touch at a bank station, I go to work. When it's 5:30, I touch back in. Maybe in between around 1 or between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m., I'll go out to buy lunch, But over a period of time, the bank system understands the trend of your spending. Yeah, and that is to understand you. Now, before we can understand the customer, you need to first of all know the customer, because if you don't know the customer, then you won't know what the customer is not. So you need to identify the customer and verify the customer, monitor the customer's transactions, and prevent them from risk, as well as preventing the bank from risk. Without KYC, all these things is impossible. KYC is the background or the foundational framework for any risk control that a bank may have. Without KYC, it's impossible to even build any control to start with. That's why I always prefer people to have a clear understanding of what KYC is before you then dive into any area of financial crime or compliance. It really helps. Yeah. So you identify a customer. We'll talk about identification and verification in a minute, and we'll talk about monitoring. Remember, I said KYC is all about identification, it's about verification, and it's about monitoring. Those three. It is not more than that. It is all about those three things. Now, who is a customer? A customer, according to definition, a customer defined by the purchase of goods or they're contracting for services as the customer or end user. So a customer can either be a person who is buying or someone who is selling or someone who's, it could be anywhere. Remember in the framework yesterday, I explained the basic framework of a bank. A bank takes money from people who deposit it and provide that same fund to someone who needs it as a loan. That's just a typical example of how bank operates. We take and we give. We take and we give. You receiving could be that you're actually taking the loan. You could be the seller. You could be the buyer. You putting the money in could be either a customer who were dealing with services. It could be or you could be the end user, or you could be the consumer, or whatever it is. It all goes around that. So as long as the customer has to deal with an institution or financial institution, more than 2 transactions, they become a definition of the customer. Yeah. So for example, if you go to MoneyGram or you go to Western Union, you're not Western Union MoneyGram or MoneyGram customer because of just 1 transaction. If you go the second time, third time, they might require you to even register. So they don't even take that chances anymore. Most money service business, maybe you want to send money to the US, send money to Nigeria using an app, they require a basic KYC information on you. It will tell you to provide your passport or your ID for them to identify you, to verify you as well. Now that we know what a customer is, now then, customers create business relationship. How do I know that? Now, a business relationship always happens between 2 parties. Now, I've used this diagram to illustrate something very interesting. According to the money laundering regulation, a business relationship is defined as business, professional, or commercial relationship between a firm and a customer, which is expected by the firm when contact is established to have an element of duration. Now, if you look at this picture, there's a woman and there is a potential man who's got a puzzle on his head. I love this picture because it's kind of descriptive and it's funny at the same time. I got this picture from a relationship seminar. What this picture kind of illustrates is a relationship between a man and a woman. Over a period of time, there's always a duration, whether you like it or not, whether you establish it or not. At some point in time, maybe the woman start looking for a wedding or to a next level, or the man start looking for a next level, or at some point maybe they break up, they go their separate ways. There's always a duration of time for any relationship. So I'm trying to let you know the extent to which that definition relationship always have an element of duration. Yeah, even if they marry, at some point one of them will die or both of them will die, so it's going to end at some point. Yeah. So what am I trying to explain now to use it in more relatable context? For those of us who must have applied for visa before, or some of us who applied to visa like Hong Kong, China, or whatever, yeah, or you apply for any application, basically, the way it works is, if you go to an embassy or a consulate, or you go for a waiver, or you go for something, even when you apply for ESTA, going to the US, what then happens is they assess you, they ask you to bring your documentation, they assess you, and they provide you with the duration of visa. Now, after the duration of visa have expired, for you to renew it, you need to bring back that same document or something similar for them to then reassess it. Why? Because initially you paid money for them to provide you with the visa, which is a duration. You're having a business relationship with the consulate, yeah? And it has an element of time that it will expire. And every time it expires, there needs to be a reassessment of that relationship. It's the same with KYC. And I'll explain in a minute. Now, that's according to Wurzburg 2011. Now, I want you to follow me. carefully with these illustrations because these actually are background and basic information that if you don't understand, it's going to become like I'm speaking gibberish when we start moving deeper. Yeah, this basic is very important. Okay, let's assume the real life information of this individual. The name is Mary G. Smith. She was born on the 1st of January 1970. Her nationality is British. Country of residence is United Kingdom. Place of birth is Russia. Gender is female, and occupation is a doctor. Now, assuming we're in a bank and we decide to get this individual's information, we verify this individual's information, we identify this, we get this person from, they identify them, assuming the name is the same. Now, this is what the individual has actually provided us, and we have that on file, we're fine, and we open an account for this individual. Now, what then happens if this individual name changes from Mary G. Edward, which is very possible? She could have married, she could have denounced her name, she might want to change her name for whatever reason. A country of residence where she was living could have changed. Why? Because her occupation has also changed. Now she says she's no more a doctor. She wants to start working as a business contractor. She got a business in Qatar. She relocated to Qatar. However, our account is still with us. Now, what does that mean for the bank? This means that this basic information, the name, the country of residence, and the occupation, has created an invalid KYC for us. Why? Then that would naturally impact a lot of things. For example, it creates an invalid fraud check, it creates an invalid sanction check, it creates an invalid adverse news and credit check, invalid financial crime check, invalid transaction monitoring crime check as well, and the list goes on and on. I would explain all this. All this would actually make sense as we go to subsequent slide and as we go further in this session. Yeah. What I'm trying to explain is now that this individual, if you go and marry, you don't tell the bank that you're going to marry. No. If you're going to change your job, you don't tell the bank that you're going to change your job. How then do you think they get to know all these things? How then do you think they update their file? It's because of people like you and me that needs to be at the back end and making sure we're using sophisticated tools to track information about individual. If we cannot track individual about information, we might block the account or request that individual to provide further information. When was the last time Barclays called you, HSBC, to say, hey, we need your passport again, bring it? No. If you're living in some other country, yeah, probably they might have called you because maybe they don't have a database that they can use to track all this information. In the UK, we do have something called the EID tool where we can use to track basic information to see that whenever you've changed basic information, we run it against every of your information, your credit check and stuff, and we would find information. It's the same way credit check tools work. Equifax works as well. They benchmark it against all your prints in the whole country. So everywhere you have a digital print, it will actually pull all this information and will match it against it. So I'll explain that that's a different conversation. Now, let's assume, now that we want to start talking about ID and V, yeah, let's assume this is the customer and a potential customer. This customer then decides to go to a bank and there is a relationship manager. We call them relationship manager or account opener or whatever. They call them relationship director as well. They are the one that actually owns the account. They manage the account for people who comes to open the account. Now, assuming this is this guy's first time in the bank, yeah, what this guy does is the RM will provide him with a form to say, please complete this form as much as possible because we don't know you. So the form is literally called identification. Now, as part of that, this individual completes the form to say, my name is John Peterson. I live in 23 London Street. I'm a doctor, and the purpose of the account is I need it for my salary. Fine, great. All right, brilliant. That alone, what the individual has completed is called identification. I need you to follow me on this. That alone is called identification. No more, no less. Identification is literally gathering information about a customer, gathering information about individual or about a business. Remember that this information you need to gather has a specific requirement by the regulatory body. So the regulatory body must have listed out a list of information, which is the minimum information you must gather about a particular customer. Now, that is what we then use to design our form to say, are we meeting regulatory standards to say these are the basic minimum information that must be in our form for us to adhere to the regulation. name, address, occupation, purpose of the relationship, and so on and so forth. But this is just the basic. Now, when this individual has completed the form, then we are fine. That is identification completed. Yeah. If there are some space that the customer did not complete, we will send the form back. Please, can you kindly complete this, complete that, complete this. Yeah. Now, when we then introduce documentation, now he has said his name is John Peterson. Well, we don't know that for a fact. His address is 23 London. Well, we don't know that for a fact. So the only way we can verify those information is to ask for a certain type of documentation, ID, passport, whatever documentation, to verify majority of the information that's been completed in the form. So, for example, the date of birth we might need a passport, or we might need the birth certificate, address, we might need utility, driver license, whatever it is. Now, we use this documentation. So there are a list of documentation that you can use, and I'll explain in a minute. You can verify that you've identified the information. You would then need to verify the information using a set of documents. Now you verify. Let's assume all the documentation this individual has provided, we're able to verify all the information in the form using valid documents. Yeah. Then that is verification being completed. Yeah. Now we can then say, well, we verify all the information, we've identified all the information, we've gathered information from the customer, we've verified all the information for the customer, then why not open the account? So as long as we can actually identify and we verify all the basic information, we would definitely open the account. Why? Because we have the basic information to monitor the customer, which is called monitoring. So now that we have the basic information about the customer, we can monitor the customer, because monitoring literally means that we keep checking periodically to understand that this customer is still who they say they are. They still live in the same address where they say they live, because this information will help us understand what is a risk and what is not a risk. Because if we don't have a good KYC process, we don't have a good monitoring. If we don't have a good KYC process, your monitoring system is rubbish. Why? Because your system will be monitoring a KYC profile that is not quality. Yeah, which means that you won't even know if the customer, you know the customer or not. Excuse me. Now, this is just one customer that we've talked about. Now, imagine we have numerous type of customer, and please bear in mind that customer is not limited to just individuals. And now, when I say individuals, these are different type of individuals having different job, having different race, having different country residence. It becomes complex. Now, imagine I was now dealing with schools, mosques, we're dealing with police stations, schools, we're dealing with government. You know, it becomes more complex. Constructing firm, shaft project, SPVs, trust, foundation, churches, you know, everyone needs an account. Yeah, people even produces gun needs an account, ASDA needs an account, everyone needs an account, and everyone would have to open an account with the bank. And this creates more transaction monitoring, understanding each and every customer so you can track them individual using system. Yeah. Now, this is a process. Now let's talk about the KYC review stages. Now, at the point when the customer has come to the bank to open an account, that is called onboarding review. So you review them at the onboarding stage, and after you review them, you need to periodically check them based on maybe 1 year or 2 years, 3 years or 5 years, depending on what the bank process is. But there's a global standard that is a minimum. Now, we have event driven. So I want you to bear in mind these 3 stages. It's very important. There are 3 stages to KYC review. The first stage is the onboarding. This is when the customer is new. The periodic review is when the customer is existing and we are doing a periodic check on all our portfolio in the bank. Event-driven is different. Event-driven is caused by a change to the customer's profile. So, for example, we might have onboarded the customer new. Maybe the time for us to periodically check the profile is not set, or it's not due. But peradventure, the organization went into a merger, or someone else took over, or the ownership of the company changes, or if it's an individual, maybe the individual actually decided that they want to change both jobs and locations or residence, or they then realize that they want to transform from a man to a woman, they're changing gender, then we need to actually, it causes an event driven. Yeah. So if you start looking for roles and jobs, there's sometimes some organization has a lot of backlog on their periodic review or event driven, or they call it remediation. You see jobs like we're looking for an onboarding expert or onboarding analyst. We're looking for a backlog. We need to clear our backlog, remediation. We're looking for someone who understands CPRs, periodic reviews. So all these stages, you can specialize in them. They have similar requirements, but they are reviewed in a different lenses. And you understand, that's why I said KYC is very broad. There is a lot of aspects that you can focus, and as you build on this foundational level, then you will then see that you can actually even become a KYC SME at some point, and it gives you a better chance in the market. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about the generic KYC AML process. Now, what we've been talking about is KYC. Now, we've not even talked about AML, and I don't think we're going to even get to the point of talking in depth about AML because this is a foundation class. But at some point, we will talk about transaction monitoring, maybe by, and I think more people are going to join. A lot of people are actually waiting for that. They sent me an email that they won't join until Thursday because of the transaction monitoring. These are people that are already involved in KYC and AML. Yeah. Okay. Now, the generic process. Now, when an individual actually comes to open an account, it means they're requesting an initiation. That's, now, look at it as you're working in the bank. So these are technologies in the bank. Someone has requested initiation to actually open an account. We would then conduct our customer due diligence, which is the KYC process. We check the customer, identify the customer, then we would then carry out, this is where AML comes into play. We would then carry out AML processing them. AML means we will screen them for sanctions, we will screen them for political exposed person PEP, and as well as adverse media. Don't worry, you don't have to don't have to write all that down. You would understand because I'm giving you in bits. Yeah. Now they would then do a credit check and legal due diligence, which is not your job to do. Then they will open the account. If everything goes fine from initiation to customer due diligence, AML checks, they check you for sanction, you don't have any criminal, financial crime background, fraud, PEP, adverse media, no bribery and corruption, no issue, no criminal, wherever. Then depending on the risk appetite, then then they do a credit check for you. If you meet the standard of savings account, credit, wherever, then they open an account. Once they open the account, then they create a monitoring profile for you, which is the periodic review, the event review, or whatever monitoring system, transaction monitoring they have. And if there is any issue in future or during the same process, then they escalate it to compliance, and compliance will decide offboarding. So offboarding means they will close your account and they'll let you go. Or if they don't close it, then it becomes a circle. They start monitoring, it just go back, it stops here, and they keep monitoring, and they can monitor you forever as long as there's no issue. But if there's an issue, it goes to compliance, they escalate, then it can go back here, then they keep monitoring. But if it goes here and compliance escalates and see that you're not within the bank risk appetite, then they offboard you. Now, this is for the guys that are compliance guys in the house. There is a masterclass that we'll be talking about compliance matrix, because it's totally different from how this is all more about the first line, because this is the second line and how compliance does the stuff, the policy and controls in financial crime controls. Anyways, let's move on. That's inner information. Now let's focus on each of these factors. We have identification, we have verification, and we have monitoring. Please remember, those are the only three aspects of KYC. Nothing more, nothing less. If anyone asks you what is KYC, KYC is know your customer. It involves identifying the customer, verifying the customer, monitoring the customer. Yeah, carrying out due diligence. Simple. Now let's talk about identification. Like I said, I'm going to browse through real quick. The FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, defines identification as a process of obtaining range of information about a person or an entity. Yeah, that's all financial identification is. No more, no less. Don't complicate it. Identification is gathering information. Simple. If the police actually stops at the police go to a crime scene, they conduct identification. They begin to ask questions. They're asking the question doesn't mean that they're actually verifying the facts. Verification is different from identification. You need to identify something before you verify them. So it's important to gather information as much as possible. Or tell me what's your name. So if I meet someone today in a network, I want to know them about them. What I'm doing is identification. I'm not verifying them. I'm not saying, oh, so you said your name is Edward. Can I see a passport? No, I'm only identifying them. So where do you work? What do you do? What area do you live? And you ask basic information. Now, if you want to carry out verification, then you begin to request. That means you want to verify them. Can I see a passport? What about your address? You begin to verify all this stuff. Yeah. So identification is simple. Now, let's assume this is an application form for a business entity. If an individual or business completes this basic information, like I said earlier on, is literally identification, no more, no less. It's gathering information about the customer to establish a profile. Now, let's talk about verification. Now, verification requires the process of verifying some of the information against documents, data, or information obtained from a reliable and independent sources. Now, what is independent and reliable? That's another headache. You begin to think, oh, what is Olu talking about? Well, let me explain. Now, the same form that has been identified, completed. Now, you need to verify some of the information. So now, in this case, let's assume this is a business account. The company says their name is blah, blah, blah. How do we know their name is blah, blah, blah? You need certificate of incorporation. That's the document that establishes that the customers, the company is indeed what they say they are. You use in the case of an individual, you use driver license to identify the name. And that's how we verify every information on the form. Now, to make it simple for us on the call and for GnB people, like I said, there is a document that I've downloaded. That I've uploaded. It's called IDNV. Now, you check this IDNV. Now, what I mean by IDNV is, how do I know what document I should use to verify the company name? How do I know that this is the document I need to verify this information or that information? That's why I provided you with the IDNV. You will see this document like this. The IDNV is something I've created. We call it the matrix, identification and verification matrix. Now, this is how it works. Now, I hope you're following me. Please look at my screen. Now, we have entities, legal entity. Now we have commercial register, where you see that it's actually color coded. It means that you can use this document for it. You can use commercial register for legal entity, legal form, register address. You can use it for operating address. You can use it for nature of the business. You can use it for proof of regulation. You can use it proof of listing. You can use it, but you cannot use it for source of fund. You cannot use it for verification of bearer shares. You can't be using it for settlor. You can't use it for partner. You cannot use it for beneficial owners. You can't use it for individual because this is not individual document. So it's the same way it works. So for example, you're looking at independent annual reports. What can I use independent annual report to verify? Well, you can use it to verify legal name. You cannot use it to verify legal form. You can use it to verify address, and that is how it goes. So if, for example, passport document, you cannot use a passport document for a legal entity, which means that you can use a passport for legal name, legal form. You can use it for all of this. You can use it for this. You can use it for UBO. We'll explain what UBO means, which means IDNV. You can use it for partner because they're individual. You can use it for full legal name of an individual. You can use it for their date of birth. You can use it blah, 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 blah. So where you see is blank, you cannot use it. When you see is color coded, you can use it. So that is what that document is meant for. So that document is one of the most important documents you receive anywhere to understand identification and verification. Yeah. So where it says primary sources, it means that you can use one of it. Where it says secondary, it means that you need two of the secondary sources to verify an information. I'll explain in a minute. Okay, let me look at my time so I know that I'm not. Wow. Okay, well, we've got just 40 minutes, less than 40 minutes now. Yeah. Okay. All right. Where was I? Now, any questions so far? Any question? I need you guys to confirm no question because I want to be sure that I'm not the only one on the call.
No question.
No questions.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, none from me.
Okay, now I'm
no questions.
Thank you. Now I know I'm not the only one on the call. So
no questions. No.
All right, brilliant. Okay. Let's go back to it. Now let's talk about document validity. Now, we understand that you identify information by gathering information. Now, don't get it too twisted, because if I say, if the regulations say you need to identify information and you need to verify the information, there are sometimes that verification documents would identify and verify. Yeah, and I'll explain what that means. Now, when you're using documents, in the IDLV document that I've just shown you, there is something called a primary source and there's something called a secondary source. Now, what do I mean by primary source and what do I mean by secondary source? Now, a primary source literally means, okay, let me put it this way. When something is primary, it means it's the core source of something. So I'll give you an example. If you want to find out if a business is registered, who would you go to? Well, the best place to go to is the company or the body that registers a company, right? Why? Because they are the only one that has the most valid information about if a company is registered or not. So if you want to find out about if a bank has been established, or I want to find out if this bank is true, is real or not, who do you go to? You go to who issued the banking license, which is the central bank or the supervisory body. Those are called primary sources. So, for example, if a company is listed on the stock exchange, on London Stock Exchange, if you want to find out a primary source of that information, I want to be sure if they're listed on London Stock Exchange or not. Then you go to London Stock Exchange, then you find out, and that is the primary source. So primary source is the original and the raw source of an information. So for example, primary source is a source that you can't go any further. If I want to know your date of birth, your passport is enough for me, because before they issued you a passport, they verified your name themselves. So I don't really need to, if I see your passport, I'm comfortable with it. Whether you fake it or not, I don't care. As long as it's the original passport, I know that's your name everywhere you go. You can, if you have two passports, well, that is not my problem. That is the problem of the government, yeah? And from a bank's perspective, you working as a KYC analyst, you are not a police investigator, you are not MI16. Your job is to identify, verify, and monitor. Your job is not to investigate outside the remit of the regulation of money laundering, terrorist financing, and all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. If you understand what primary source are, primary source example, a government company register, we have copy of trust deed, we have formation document. Formation documents is a document that establishes, that shows the creation of something. So a certificate of incorporation proves that this company is actually created. Those are primary sources. Birth certificate shows that you were born on so date. Those are primary sources. We have regulators' website. Regulator says we are regulating these people. You don't need to go to Bloomberg or whatever, because and I'll explain what that means. Regulator, you go for the primary sources. Central banks are primary sources. Government departments, Ministry of Finance, issuing certain information on circular, those are primary sources. Now, when we talk about secondary sources means they are a downgrade of a primary sources, which means they are not the owner of the information. They actually act as a conduit for that information. For example, we have Thomson Reuters, we have Bloomberg, we have Moody, Bankers Almanac. These people or these organizations or this body or this tool or third party are not a primary owner of those data. So they only reflect it as a credible source coming from the primary data or the primary source. Yeah. So what that means is, before you can then say something is primary or you want to totally rely on it, it's either you're using a primary source or you're using two secondary sources. Why am I saying that? Now, if I am a chronic liar and my name is A and my friend is B, is also a chronic liar. Now, the way it works is, if say for example, there is Mr. A, which is me, and there's Mr. B, which is B. Assuming we don't know each other, we're not friends, but you know us, yeah? You know both of us separately, but we don't know each other. If you ask me, and you both know that we're chronic liars, well, maybe not chronic liars, but you don't trust us that much. If you then ask me, Olu, how much do you buy this shirt? And I tell you, well, I bought this shirt for £1,000, 50 pence. Well, you might not believe me because you'll be like, well, it works in Asda and it earns £7 per hour. How did he buy a shirt of £1,000? Well, you won't believe me that much, but you might like, well, I don't know. Then if you ask your friend who also works in, I don't know, wherever it works, yeah, and he says, oh, this is the same shirt I sold. How much did you get this shirt? And he tells you, oh, well, I got it for £1,000, 50 pence. Now, there is an element of truth because both of them don't even know each other, and it's too coincidental for you not to believe them. That's the same way secondary source works. Because why? It is easier for you, let's assume that shirt is a Versace shirt, it's easier for you to go to Versace shop and say, how much is this shirt? And they tell you it's £1,050. That's a primary source. Assuming you don't have access to Versace, for example, maybe Versace has membership only, which means that you don't have a member, but you still need that information, and you see two people actually wearing that shirt. If both of them are saying the same thing, then there's an element that you can rely on it. And that's the same way secondary sources work. So secondary sources, you need two of them to verify a certain information before you can totally rely on it. Yeah? All right, I'm going to move faster, no time. Now we've talked about identification, which requires gathering information. We've talked about verification, which requires using a set of documents or data or information from either primary sources 1 or secondary sources 2 to verify certain information. Now we'll talk about monitoring. Now, monitoring literally means that a company or firm must conduct ongoing monitoring of a business relationship. Remember, I said business relationship has a duration, an element of duration. So a firm or company must conduct ongoing monitoring of the business relationship with their customer. This is a separate but related obligation from the requirement to apply CDD measures, means customer due diligence. I'll explain that in a minute. Don't get yourself too worked up on all this terminology. Yeah? So it means that if we identify a customer, we verify a customer, we're okay to open an account for them, but we need to monitor them. So we have to have a control in place to say, when is the next time we're going to look at their profile? We'll look at the profile in a year time, we'll look at the profile in 2 years time. But then I will then explain why do we decide a particular customer should be looked at in a year time and a particular customer should be looked at in 2 years time. That document that you download, that the customer risk assessment, is one of the most important documents you're also going to receive, because that actually helps you assess a customer automatically. So this has not been produced before, but even majority of banks don't even have that calculation and that weighting. I will tell you for a fact they do not. Anyways, let's move on. Risk classification. Yeah. Now, remember I said when you monitor a customer, you need to monitor them. How do I know what duration I need to monitor them? It means that for me to know that if there are 3 customers, I want to monitor one every year, I want to monitor another one every 2 years, and I want to monitor another one every 3 years. There must be a reason why I'm actually segregating the duration of monitoring. And that element or the rationale has to be based on risk, perceived risk. Maybe because I think one is too risky and I can't leave it alone on our book not to look at their profile in another 3 years, because they're quite spontaneous, they pose a lot of risk, which means I need to monitor them closely every year. So that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about risk classification. Yeah. I'm going to be running up very soon in half an hour. Okay. Now, when we talk about risk in KYC, okay, let me start with basic risk. Don't let us talk about risk in KYC. Let's talk about risk in general. Risk in general can be categorized into 4. Why did I say that? You can only reduce a risk, you can transfer it, you can accept it, or you can avoid it. And it applies even when you want to cross the road. When you want to drink water, when you want to cook, risk is always there. When you want anything you want to do, there's always an element of risk. There is no such thing as zero risk. It does not exist in the world. There's always the risk of either contacting coronavirus even in your house or stepping out, because the risk is lower and is higher in some instances, but does not mean that the risk is zero. Nothing. The risk is never zero. Now, let me explain this. There's this story I usually use to drive home my point on risk. Let's assume you're a guy, or I've got a wife at home, and say my wife loves what's this movie women love to watch? Love and Hip Hop. I don't know. Yeah, Love and Hip Hop or whatever it is. Let's assume it's Love and Hip Hop. Yes, and she's so engrossed in Love and Hip Hop that she cannot do without watching Love and Hip Hop. But then again, we have a kitchen, but we don't have a TV in the kitchen. So she always go to the lounge to watch Love and Hip Hop while making dinner for the family. But then it has happened more than 3 times that she's burnt down the whole kitchen. Now, the fact that she's burnt down the whole kitchen, me as a compliance expert, when I come home, I need to assess the risk. And what I look at is, okay, babe, we need to look at how we're going to sort this whole burning of the kitchen down. Until you get to the point that you have to burn everyone in the house. So we need to assess it. Now, there are four ways in which I can solve this. Number one is I can either choose to reduce the risk. And one way of reducing the risk is, okay, this is what we're going to do. I would install smoke detector. I would install fire extinguisher, fire blanket, and heat detector on the wall. And she's happy with it. That is you reducing the risk, but does not mean that the kitchen might not burn down again, because it's just a control you're putting in place to reduce the chances of the kitchen getting burnt. Yeah. Now, the second one is transfer. You can transfer the risk. Now, one way to transfer the risk is we can either say, well, babe, no more cooking in the kitchen. I'm fine, no more dinner. We will get a Nigerian restaurant, or we'll get a restaurant, or wherever, or we'll get the Spanish restaurant to always deliver our dinner for us. Yeah, we'll do takeout. So they'll deliver our dinner. They cook it in the kitchen. Now, the risk is not being eradicated. The risk is being transferred to the people who are going to cook it in the kitchen. That is called transferred risk. So we're moving it to them. They can burn their own kitchen, but not our kitchen. But does not mean that the risk, we've eradicated the risk. The risk is still there, but we've only moved it to someone else. That is called transfer risk. Now, we can accept the risk. Another way to accept the risk is, okay, I know you love and hip hop, but please be careful next time. I'm not putting in control. I'm not transferring the risk. We're just accepting it and hoping that things will be better. Or the last one is we could avoid the risk. Now, another way of avoiding the risk is I will just come on one day, scrape all the buns, cooker and everything, and change it into a music room. So it means that we don't have kitchen anymore. We don't even have a microwave. All food, we're not cooking. If we want to eat, we'll go out. So that's just no risk. It doesn't mean that there's no risk. The risk is just been avoided totally. But it means that there's still risk. It doesn't mean that the house might not burn down. Well, maybe we have microwave. If we are actually making tea, we can still burn down the house, but we've avoided it totally. Yeah. Now, the reason why I'm actually saying this is I'm trying to get you to start thinking when you start working in areas of KYC, in wherever bank or institution you find yourself, on how you think more outside the box. So there are certain risks that you can always look to mitigate. You can actually risks are meant to be mitigated. Now you must look at it from a control point of view to say, well, can I really eradicate this risk? Then what can we transfer it? So don't worry, this analogy I've given you, just keep it with you. It might not make sense now, but it will make sense when you start reviewing real life cases, and you will see that whenever you start typing your commentary, even your line manager or the keyword person will understand that you have an in-depth understanding of how to mitigate a risk in the bank. Okay. Now, KYC risk factors. Now, KYC risk factors is divided into 4. Now, we've talked about the general type of risk, kitchen risk and all that stuff. Now, that's not what I'm talking about now. That is just an analogy to drive home my point. Now, there are only 4 major risks in KYC. And I mean major because there are some sub-risks that could be attached to it, but just focus on just these 4. They are called geographical risk, customer risk, product risk, and delivery and channel. I will take them one after the other. And we're going to close very soon anyway, so I won't have to bombard you with too much information. We'll take it in pieces. Now let's talk about customer risk. Now, or let's talk about the 4 risks basically. Let's assume this is a customer. Now, this is a customer who wants to join the bank. We don't know this individual. We don't know the kind of risk they pose. We don't know what they do. We don't know nothing. So these 4 factors is what you should always use to measure every customer. And I mean all customer. You would never have a complete risk assessment without analyzing the geography, the customer, the product and delivery and channel of a customer. That is why I said you need these 4 factors. Call it, at the back of your mind, call it 4 pillars of KYC. The first one is, I said definition of KYC is identification, verification, and monitoring. This one is 4 pillars of KYC. There are 4 cardinal points to measure every type of customer regardless. Yep. Now, let's assume this is a customer, we want to assess it. This customer, we need to assess him on 4 factors. Without these 4 factors, you can never have a customer risk assessment. Now, the calculator you have is been embedded in it. So now this is for the financial crime guys that are on the call. It's embedded in the calculator to have a different level of weight for each risk factor, and we've actually calculated it using logic and models. So that actually drives the customer risk assessment. So you would measure the customer on geography, measure them on customer risk, measure them on the product risk, and measure them on the channel risk. I'm going to explain, take them one after the other. Now, what is geographical risk? Well, geographical risk kind of ranges to what type of risk a geography poses. Now, an individual is from Sudan doesn't mean they're risky. Well, yeah, the fact that they're getting their money from Libya, or their job, they work in Iraq, or they work in Russia, or they work in the UK, or work wherever. Different countries and region and geography poses different type of risk. They do not own the same risk. That's why you're going to see the USA to say, well, in this time we're actually putting a ban on EU. Why? Because at that point in time, they perceive EU to pose more risk than even African countries. Why? Because the risk that is spanning from there is out of their risk appetite. Now, we're looking at it from a financial point of view, KYC. We have different countries holds different risk, and how is that? How does that translate into what we're talking about? Geographical risk could either poses a risk of sanctions, embargo. So, for example, if the EU, the UK, US have actually placed a sanction on, say, Russia, then you know that Russia actually poses a risk. An individual or business, say they're operating in Russia, then you must understand that, well, do we want to do business with this customer? And if we want to do business with this customer, are they doing what our regulation says they shouldn't do? If they are not, doesn't mean that this is going away. What if they decide to do it while they're being a customer with us? Which means that the monitoring process is very important to understand the risk, which means we cannot look at them every year, every 4 years or 3 years. We need to look at them closely because they pose a higher risk. So now, geographical risk can range from sanction type of risk to failed states. Maybe there is unrest, terrorist financing, maybe in Libya, or you're looking at in higher risk countries such as Sudan, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, wherever. Yeah, those are the kind of risks that different geography poses. Another risk that different geography poses is bribery and corruption. Like you can see the likes of Bangladesh, the likes of Venezuela. Indonesia has a level of risk as well. The UK even have a level of risk of bribery and corruption, but it's not that. They've got a very strong framework. They have a Bribery Corruption Act. We have Nigeria, for example, the level of corruption. So if you want to know further this, you can write this down. Just put it somewhere to go to and Google know your country. Then you understand what I'm talking about. Know your country has all the basic risk index of each country. So then you can understand the risk that geography poses as well. And it's from bribery and corruption. We have the likes of under the table bribery and corruption. Someone was telling me that Nigeria is very corrupt in terms of bribery and corruption. And another person said, well, Nigeria is not corrupt because in Bangladesh, the way they actually, a policeman could tell you, a man could tell a policeman, oh, sorry, sir, you dropped money on the ground. And the policeman looks at, oh, yeah, thank you. That's my money. And he picks it up. And that could actually even be a bribe if the person gave the policeman a bribe. So it differs from one point to another. Now, there is also something called GnB. Yeah, this is a type of risk that is not your fault. It's not the country's fault. So we have, if you look at the picture clearly, we see that the EU is playing love music to Ukraine, but the Ukraine is chained and has a relationship with Russia. Now let me give you a digress analogy for this one. Now let's assume Russia is a guy and Ukraine is a lady, yeah, and EU is a very close friend of Ukraine, and EU is a guy as well, but EU kind of love Ukraine, but because Ukraine is in a relationship with Russia, um, uh, then you'll be thinking, what is this picture trying to tell you? Now, let's assume Russia is a very violent boyfriend. Okay, Russia beats Ukraine. Russia takes money from Ukraine. Russia abuses Ukraine. So now, even if the EU, for the history that EU has with Ukraine, maybe for some reason the EU wants to give Ukraine some money, to take care of herself, go do her nails and look better, even with the whole abuse, just try and get yourself together. EU is definitely sure that if I give Ukraine some money, Russia will still take it, which means that if EU don't like Russia and EU wants to put a restriction or a ban on Russia to say we would never allow our money to get to Russia, then it would be a wrong idea for EU to give Ukraine some money if they know they don't want their money to get to Russia. Yeah. So that's what the illustration is all about. So this is another way that some countries get caught up in the web of jurisdictional risk. It's because sometimes they could share border with a country close. Sometimes they could be in close trade deal or policy with some countries. So the reason why a country might be rated high or highest has a lot of factors, and that is meant for some internal financial crime guys on country methodology to develop a risk appetite based on the bank and global standard. Yeah. So that's a different area that, when you want to go into, you can become an expert in that. Yeah. But that's different. But your own is just get data and use it for your assessment. Okay.
So, Oli, I just wanted to ask quickly, DNDB, what does that stand for?
Do not do business. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Hello? Yep. All right. Brilliant. Some other bank also call that one internet denial list. Some call them blacklist. Some call them country restrictions. Some call them whatever it is. But it's just an idea. It's just to give you the reason why we would not be doing business with certain countries. Yeah. All right. Brilliant.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Now let's go into country risk. Please bear in mind, we talked about the 4 type of risk factor we have in KYC. We have geographical risk, we have customer risk, we have delivery and channel, and we have, what's the last one? Customer, products, and we have products here. Now, let's talk about customer risk, which is the second one. Now, a customer by itself poses a type of risk. Now, I'm not talking about the customer, I'm talking about customer risk. Just by themselves, not looking at where they come from, not looking at whatever, just by the nature of the customer, they have a risk. I'll tell you how that happens. Now, an individual who is a man poses a different risk as an individual who is also a man who is a judge or who is a prime minister. A prime minister poses a higher risk than an individual who is not a prime minister. They are both human beings, but because of the nature of who they are, they poses a different type of risk. A prime minister is more prone to bribery and corruption by the influence of the power they hold. They call them a politically exposed person. We're going to talk about that in subsequent slide. Now, if you look at, for example, a church or a mosque, a church or a mosque poses a different type of risk, to another business that actually just sells plastic. Why? Because a church and a mosque get their money from unidentified individual that cannot be traced, and by nature of the type of customer that they are, they poses a different risk. A money service business that does money money transfer, Western Union or MoneyGram, poses a different type of risk to a company that actually creates guns. A company that deals with chemical poses a different type of risk to a trust. A trust poses a different type of risk to an SPV. An SPV poses a type of risk to, so you can see that a customer by itself, they have a different type of risk that needs to be assessed. That's why I said it's deeper than just looking at the surface. But you just focus on the surface, just follow me. All this deeper information has been encapsulated into the the calculator that you have. So you don't have to stress, you don't have to think about too much. Just put in what you understand by the customer. The calculator will calculate it automatically and give you your result. Then you can then analyze it and assess it. So let's go for that. Now, understanding our customer, which is the customer risk, depends on how, who, when, what, where, who this customer is. Now, who the customer are is not just, it doesn't just end at who the customer are, it also connects to what they do. So a customer who is a bomb expert or doctor is different from the customer who is just a teacher. They pose different risk, because a teacher would not, we don't expect the teacher to get money from multiple places. But if you say you are a freelance contractor, then your account transaction might be more difficult to track, because then you say you have a contract in Yemen today, you have in Qatar, you have in the US tomorrow. How do we know which one is which? So you can see that they pose different level of risk. Yeah. Now, who they are related to is another problem. Now, if you understand, we're going to go into PEP, but I'll explain what PEP means later in a bit. The customer itself might not even be the issue. It could be who they are related with that could be issue. Now, from research and even from previous analysis and from even a global standard, majority of prominent people who has influence actually launder money through people who have no influence. Yeah. So you see the likes of the president of Syria or the prime minister of Syria, wherever it is, Assad. Recently, there's a case where some the nieces or the nephews' account was actually closed by Barclays. That was last year, and there was initially no connection, because she had no last name connecting. So she's the daughter of the prime minister's sister. So you can see all this connection. They can use them to launder money because they are not under the radar. You can have Abacha laundered money through his immediate family, and so on and so forth as well. Yeah. Now, delivery and channel. So if you understand what customer risk is, I'm just giving you a basic information and foundational information on what customer risk poses. Now, delivery and channel talks about how a customer is being onboarded into the bank, how they've been adopted, and how we open an account. How did they get onboarded? Now, delivery and channel poses different risk. Risk of, in this day and age, you can open an account online. You can open an account over the phone, mobile banking, like Monzo and so on. You can go into the bank and open an account. There's even some accounts you can open on social media through Facebook. Excuse me. There's some accounts in some countries you can open through ATM. You can open through even through Instagram. There's some accounts that they advertise on Instagram. You can open an account through Instagram, wherever. Yeah. This is the delivery channel. What are the risks they poses? Now, an individual could actually pose that this is who they are, this is what they do, but in reality, this is the person behind the computer. They could also pose a kind of level of, oh yeah, hello, hi, I want to open an account, but in reality, there could be a phone scam. Yeah, it could be face to face. Doesn't mean that it doesn't still pose risk, but all this risk that I'm highlighting poses a different level of risk. How we measure that risk is not what we're talking about now. That's a different conversation. But face to face doesn't mean that the risk is zero. Like I said, there is no such thing as zero risk. It could be that it's not the owner of the passport, they just look alike or whatever. There's still an element of risk in there. Yeah. Now, we've talked about customer risk, we've talked about delivery and channel and geography. Now, the last one is the product risk. Now, what does product risk mean? Now, we had a discussion yesterday where we talk about you understanding KYC, and don't leave it to just understanding KYC. Try to attach as many products as possible. Now, product means the type of products we are offering the customer increases the risk of the customer. So, for example, if a customer comes to open an account with us and they want to open a savings account, well, there's some savings account that you don't even have an ATM card. You only have a passbook. I have an account like that with Nationwide. I don't have ATM. I don't have online bank. I don't even know how much is there. I just go, deposit my money and they write my balance on my passbook and I go away. Yeah, so I can't withdraw except I go back to the bank and I withdraw some money. Now, if someone is opening that type of account, then the chances of them actually transferring money, moving money around is very slim. they can't transfer money out except they come to the bank. So we always verify everything every time. It's different from someone who is using a current account. So while the whole world is asleep, then the person can actually transfer some money, you can do whatever, or whenever there is like COVID-19 and everyone is panicking, they can actually, find some loopholes to do whatever, or the person can actually transfer from one person to another as many times as possible, which creates more complexity in their transactional pattern. Yeah. Or if the person is actually dealing with business account, that's even much more riskier because the person is more open to more accounts. Now, if the person is dealing with premium current account or wealth management, now the person, you're opening up the person to a global and transactional complexity. Now, if the person is dealing with trade finance, which has to deal with between borders and deal with different companies, multiple billion-dollar companies, that then that's a different risk. Now, if the customer is also dealing with a corresponding banking account, which has multiple transactional cross-border that can actually span in a wire form, going from one suite to another, instructions, different type of MT 103, 109, blah, 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 then it becomes more complex. Yeah. So what I'm trying to drive at is the more complex or more risky the product is, the more risk it adds to the customer profile. So these 4 major areas create an assessment on how we perceive a customer to pose a risk. Any question, please? As we have come to the end of today's session, any question, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about delivery and channel risk. So you said the different types. It was the only ones I noted down was online, mobile, face-to-face, ATM, and are there any more?
So just recategorize it into 2, just for simplicity. There are numerous ways that you might not be able to track, but it's just face-to-face or non-face-to-face.